So we start our panel. My name is Märt Läänemets from Tartu, Estonia. And my position is the president of Estonian Oriental Society. But in my academic activities, I am the freelancer or independent researcher, if you like more. Formerly, I served many decades, for a few decades, the University of Tartu. Last year, I am free man, but continuing my academic activities. The first presentation in the program I see is my own. So my topic is, as you know already, the pilgrimage of the merchant son Sudhana from India to Far East. Travelogue, in quotation marks, of a Mahayana Buddhist character. Okay, first I put the abstract text, which was delivered to everybody already earlier, and I give some introduction. So the character Sudhana, which is titled as the merchant son, or Shresthitaraka in Sanskrit language, it comes from India. And he is the main protagonist of the famous Buddhist Mahayana Sutra, Gandavyuha Sutra, in original Sanskrit, which is translated differently in English language, or Supreme Array Scripture, or Flower Arrangement Sutra, or even some more different. It was quite early already translated into Chinese language also, and it became very popular in China and East Asia. And this protagonist, Sudhana, started, we can say, live his own life in China, which and it transformed into quite a different form in later Chinese literature. So I have studied this sutra, Gandavyuha Sutra, quite a long time. And so I know almost in details the Sanskrit source, but only recently I got more interested on this his developments in Chinese literature, and therefore my today's presentation is like little very superficial overview about the main issues and then some source texts which exist where the character Sudhana is presented in China and Far East. So I put on my slides some illustration also in China and especially in Korea. There are very rich artistic, very many illustrations from different times. From India, we have not illustrations, and this you can see now, Sudhana and Parrot. It is from Nepal, as in Nepalese Buddhism. Also, the Gandavyuha Sutra was one of the most important, 9 most important sutras, and those illustrations are from the eldest survived manuscripts from the 12th century. And okay, and in every slide I have one illustration also. So, and this is one example how the Sudhana, or in Chinese language, Shanzai Tungzi, was depicted in China. So there is some differences. In India, he was the young man, but in China, quite a little boy. In one literary source, we even told that he was 8 years old only. Okay, let's go on. And first, I talk a little bit about the Sudhana in Indian sources. So the Kandavyuha Sutra is not the only and perhaps even not the earliest source text where we meet this character, but maybe a little bit more earlier are Avadana texts, Avadana and Mahavastu, which are also the Buddhist collection, which contain, we can say, the didactic stories about the life of bodhisattvas and other saints. And the most well-known story about Sudhana contains in the large collection of Divya Avadana, which was written down perhaps sometimes in the 2nd century. And the 30th chapter of this collection is the Sudhana Kumara Avadana, which tells us the story about the Prince Sudhana. Prince Kumara, Sudhana Kumara. Kumara in Sanskrit means prince. And in this story, Sudhana is the king, is the son of the pious king of Panchala, which is the northwest India historically. And he falls in love in the Kinnara daughter Manohara. Kinnaras are some mythical creatures in Indian mythology, but because of some intrigues, the wife was taken away from here, and then Sudhana starts a journey to find him. And the main part of this story describes his journey with many hardships and very dangerous, and finally he finds his wife, and they turn back to his homeland. He attains the royal seat and rules his country as a righteous king. And the illustration here, which depicts the end of the story, Sudhana and Manohara return to home, it is from the very famous Buddhist structure Borobudur in the Indonesia, Java, where there are tens of reliefs depicting the life and actions of Sudhana from different sources. And this is the scene of Sudhana and Manohara returning home. So this story was written down in quite a major literary form, sometimes in the 2nd century, but perhaps the story itself and hero of it is much older, but we have not earlier recorded sources about this. But we can see that in Indian tradition, such kind of stories about pious kings and the virtuous princes and their wives are very popular. Let's say the famous epos Ramayana. The Rama story is the most famous, but the Sudhana Kumara story very much resembles the Ramayana. So this is comes from the Indian folklore or vernacular tradition. In Buddhist tradition, it is put in the literary form as the didactic story of the Prince Sudhana. And then next source, which is my favorite, which I have studied quite many years, it's the Kandavyuha Sutra. And the name and the character is loaned from this earlier vernacular tradition, as the Gandavyuha Sutra is composed and written down about the same time as the Avadana, then it is not correct to say that the character is taken from the Avadana story and transformed into the Buddhist saint or seeker in Gandavyuha Sutra. Perhaps those literary sources were developed in parallel way, but in different directions. So in Gandavyuha Sutra, the Sudhana is not anymore a prince. His title is Shresti Tarka. It is the son of the wealthy citizen Riftin, and his home was perhaps, according to some, the great city Tšernjuk, which is believed to locate in the eastern coast of Indian Peninsula, near the famous Buddhist former holy place Amaravati. And in this sutra, the Sudhana is the young man who is eager to become the Bodhisattva, the Buddhist saint, but for this he has to learn many things and attain the spiritual awakening. And therefore, first he met the Bodhisattva Manjushri, who is depicted in this illustration here. And Manjushri sees his great potential and send Sudhana into the long journey or pilgrimage to find Kalyana Mitras, or spiritual benefactors or teachers. This main plot of the sutra is the journey of Sudhana, when he visits altogether 53 Kalyana Mitras, or spiritual friends, and every of them teaches him one aspect of the Bodhisattva education. And finally, he met the great Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, Husien in Chinese, which finalizes his spiritual journey, and he become Bodhisattva. So we can short comparison, as in Avadanas, the Sudhana is a prince, and his aim is to find his lost wife. So in Gandavyuha Sutra, his social status is different. He is not anymore the nobleman, but the son of the wealthy citizen, merchant, or something like that. And he's the 100% the spiritual seeker, the man who wants to become a bodhisattva. And one more important episode is why Sudhana has such a name, which means good wealth. So his personage and his purse in this story is connected with quite worldly material wealth, and therefore when his first Kalyana Mitra Manjushri met him, he saw his spiritual potentials, and he was considering why Sudhana was called by this name Sudhana, which means good wealth. And here is one excerpt from the text, which tells us that it was because when before Sudhana birth, then his house, like in the magical way, became very rich. The 7 great treasuries by them itself appeared into this house. So it is maybe the aim of the authors of this text to show that the worldly wealth, the material wealth, and spiritual wealth are not antagonistic, but they go together. So, and maybe this is one aspect why the character Sudhana became so popular in China, because Chinese value very much this worldly values as the wealth and piety. So, and now very shortly I give the overview how this figure Sudhana was traveled in China. First, of course, the Gandavyuha Sutra is, we have 3 full translations in Chinese Buddhist canon. Here, the earliest already from the beginning of 5th century, then it was translated again in the end of 7th century in the Tang Dynasty era, and once more 100 years later in the end of 8th century. The 2 first are the same title in Chinese, Ru Fa Jie Pin, entering into the Dharma realm, but the latest translation has different and more longer title, but in all 3 versions, the Sudhana's name is the same in Chinese translation, Shanzai Tunzi. No? What I translated, the youngster good wealth, or the boy good wealth. And here, this picture is the Korean work from the Korean time, which depicts the assembly of the bodhisattvas who were gathering to listen the Buddha's teaching. So, and as early as from the Sung period, this like the popular form of this sutra, which is focused purely on the journey of Sudhana, were circulating in Chinese soil and became very, very popular. And if you check now the internet sources, you can find several pages where the same story is available, and even some audio-visual forms in YouTube. So this story circulates in China until today. But of course, it is not anymore the Indian story, but Chinese story with many Taoist influences, but the main aspects are the same. His birth was miraculously connected with the accumulation of wealth. And as a young boy, he showed up the great filiality, xiao, in Chinese, and in quite a young age met the Bodhisattva Manjushri or Ventushri, and started this journey to become a Bodhisattva. And here is a Chinese picture which depicts Sudhana, the young boy, meeting with his first Kalyana Mitra, or spiritual friend, Megashri, in Chinese, Duyun Pichu. And later, in original sutra, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, or Kuan Yin in Chinese tradition, was only one teacher of Sudhana among many, and not the main teacher. But as Kuan Yin was extremely popular and influential in Chinese Buddhism and Buddhist tradition, then in later developments, the Sudhana or Shanzai Tunzi was mainly connected with Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, and in some time in 16th century, the collection of stories was composed, which is complete tale of Guanyin and the southern seas. And here also the residence of Guanyin was mentioned, which is the Miaoshan, the island near the eastern coast of China, but this name came from India, which was originally one mountain, which is believed to be the original place of this Avalokiteshvara. And later developments, I mention only two. In the famous 16th century novel The Journey to the West, there also a character who is called Hunghayar, or Red Boy, appeared, which later transforms into the virtuous boy, became the adolescent of Guanyin, and changes his name to the Shanzai. So again, connected with this tradition. And even later, another source, the precious scroll of Shanzai and Longnu, appears in the 18th or 19th century, where Guanyin has, after Sudhana, another attendee, the girl who is the famous Lungnu. Okay, but I cannot tell any more. And finally, it's my last slide. In Korea, the story and this illustration tradition became again very, very popular. And even I know at least one contemporary novel which is written again about this story, and also Japan. And in Japan, one very interesting phenomenon appeared when during the time of the Tokugawa shogunate, it was built Tokaido Highway from Edo, then following this Sudhana journeys tradition. In this highway, the 53 stations were built, and the famous artist Utagawa Hiroshige created a series of paintings where all those 53 were depicted. So, okay, this is my short overview. I already used more time than I was given, and now I finish. Thank you for attention. If you have any question, please write them down, and I try to give answers in the very end. Thank you. And now we have to go on. And our next presenter is my dear colleague and student, Märt Tšernjuk from the Institute of Cultural Research, University of Tartu, and he's telling about 3 kinds of sayings in the Zhuangzi. Please, Märt, the floor is yours. Or microphone is yours.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Alevtina Solovia for asking me to join this conference. I'm very thankful and honored to be here. And I would like to talk a little bit about Zhuangzi. The reason why I talk about Zhuangzi is that this is a text I've been studying for the last 10 years, and also trying to translate it into Estonian. So I've been with this text for quite a long time recently. So today's topic is 3 kinds of sayings in the Zhuangzi. It's quite a specific aspect of this text, but I hope I can say at least something useful about this topic in 15 minutes, because it's a very short time, as we know. So I start from the beginning. So these three kinds of sayings in Chinese, it's called sanyan, is basically three rhetorical devices Zhuangzi is using in the text. And the first of them is here you can see it's called Yuyan, and it is translated in different ways. First, you have three different translations: imputed words, sayings from the lodging place, words that are presented as coming from the mouths of other people. So these are just some examples. These are the two first characters of chapter 27 of Zhuangzi, and I will analyze a little bit what is the meaning of the first character. The first character, yu. So if we look at check it out from the Shouwen Jiezi, the old Chinese dictionary, then we see that the definition here is only one character, which has a meaning of relying on, transmitting, mailing, sending from modern Chinese, but it's also connected with meanings with lodging, residing, dwelling, and so on. So there is somebody under the roof. It's a phonosemantic character, but still about dwelling, residing somewhere. So this is just analyzing the character a little bit, but the meaning usually Yuyan is understood as something like fables, allegories, parables, metaphors, and so on. So I'll go into more detail in a couple of seconds. The second one is Zhongyan or Zhongyan, which can be translated in two different ways. The first version of this character might mean something like double, multiple, repeat, duplicate, and the second pronunciation is connected with meanings like heavy, important, weighty, and so on. So two possible translations for this term is repeated words or weighted words. If you think about the meaning multiple or repeat, then in today's standard Chinese, this word is used to represent duplicated words or morphemes. Now, the third one from these three kinds of sayings in the Zhuangzi is the most important one, because this is something very specific to the text of Zhuangzi. So it's called the Zheyan, and it is very often translated as goblet words. So those who have read the Zhuangzi know something about it definitely are familiar with this term, but I guess for people who are not so familiar, this might seem a little bit confusing. So this character Zhe is picture of a wine vessel in ancient China, and if you look at the definition from the classical Chinese dictionary, then it said it's a round vessel, and another name for this is dan. I have here some more wine vessels from ancient China, some 4 examples, and the second one is used as also as a definition for this Zhe. So it is originally some kind of wine vessel. Now Zhuangzi, of course, used this in a different meaning. It is one rhetorical device in Zhuangzi. I also have here the word Kikee for a tilting vessel, which in ancient China was in Confucianism, it was used to represent the idea of a doctrine of the mean, but in Taoism it was more about representing the idea of the emptiness. So what was it, this tilting vessel? So in Confucianism, it was kind of vessel where you put some water, for example, and if you didn't add any water, it didn't tilt at all, so it was not straight. If you added too much water, it tilted too much and water came out. So you had to add exactly right amount of water that the vessel would be straight. And here comes the meaning and the doctrine of the mean. For Taoism, the meaning was different, so it was only two possible ways of this vessel. First was when it was empty, it was straight, but if you added some water, it tilted. So empty is better than full is the idea behind it. Now, chapter 27 of Zhuangzi is most important when we talk about the three types of sayings in Zhuangzi. It starts with these two characters, as I already mentioned, but the title is translated into English and other languages quite differently. So we have here some examples how this yuyan is translated, or the chapter in general. We have titles like language, metaphorical language, symbols, metaphors, fables, and so on. So they are kind of similar, but at the same time not so similar. The last one, Bruxiporin, in translation words lodged elsewhere, is here as a example of the most recent translation of Zhuangzi into English. So the year I have here is wrong, because actually it was published last year, not this year. I confused this one. So it was the full translation of Zhuangzi was published last year, the most recent one. So how does this chapter 27 begin? So we have here the first 3 or 4 paragraphs from this chapter, and I will have a text in Chinese in the most recent translation, and also one of the first translation in English from James Legge, just to compare. So the lesson about these the chapter about this topic in Zhuangzi starts like this. Almost all of my words are presented as coming from the mouths of other people, and of those, the better part are further presented as citations from weighty ancient authorities. But all such words are actually spillover goblet words, giving forth new meanings constantly, harmonizing them all through their heavenly transitions. So here we have quite many actually important terms. First, if you look at the translation, then the yuyan in Siporin's translation is here translated as words that are coming from the mouths of other people. And Zhongyan is translated as citations from weighty ancient authorities. And Zheyan is translated as spillover goblet words. So the translations are a bit different. Now, next in this chapter, it goes into more detail, explaining them one by one. So the first one Yuan is explained like this. The 9/10 of or so attributed to other discuss the topic by borrowing an outside viewpoint. The father does not serve as a matchmaker for his own son, for praises for the father are not as effective as those from the mouth of another. And the blame due then goes not to me, but to someone else. In any case, those who agree will be responsive, while those who not will object. For people call right whatever agrees with themselves and call wrong whatever differs from themselves. So here we see where the meaning that words that lodge elsewhere from Siporin come from, why it is translated like this, because this little paragraph basically says the same thing. So Yuan is used for words that are coming from most from other people and but also from other beings more generally. So it is not only words from ancient elders, but also animals, trees, rivers, and whatever Zhuangzi is using to explain his ideas. There are many allegorical stories, as those who have read Zhuangzi knows that most of this book is full of allegorical stories. I only mentioned two from the beginning, the Kun and Peng story, and later on we have at the end of the inner chapters, we have the Hundun story, for example. So many allegories in this book. The Zhongyan, or the weighty or repeated words, are explained in chapter 27 like this. The 7/10 or so that are presented as citations from weighty ancient authorities are meant to diffuse garrulous fault-finding, eliciting agreement with the words of these venerable elders instead. But in fact, some of those who come before us in years, if they have not gone through the warp and the woof of things in a way befitting their age, from the root to the tip, do not have any real priority over us. A man of advanced years with nothing to give him priority over others has not fulfilled the course of a human being, and a human being devoid of the course of human being should really just be called a stale, obsolete oldster. So here we have a great example of the style of Zhuangzi already. What is he saying is that though Zhongyan is, the term is about weighty and words of the elders, he's still critical about them because if those elders are not understood the way, let's say, then they are not so special at all. And this, what I wanted to say. So this is a very good example of, there are many good examples from the book that I don't have time to read here from Zhuangzi, where he's mostly using Confucius, but also other scholars and figures from Chinese history to say or to convey his own meaning. So Confucius is not talking exactly what about Confucianism, but rather quite often philosophical Taoism. So using different. So this first and the second category, this Yuyan and Zhongyan, there have been many articles and discussions about what do they actually exactly mean, because they can be understood differently. They have been understood quite differently, but this is just one example then. Now the last one, here, another slide for this Zhuangzi is just the word. Those who know Mandarin Chinese, of course, know that Zhuang is connected with words that mean important or significant or valuable. And I think Zhuangzi in Zhuangzi is mostly it can be used mostly understood as citations or paraphrasing, with giving or also giving kind of a new meaning to older ancient scholars. Quotations are not so common. There are some quotations from maybe Shijing or some other books, but not. And from Tao Te Ching we find something, but not exactly quotations, I think. Now the last one, Zhuyan, here is quite a long paragraph about this, so I will not read all of it, but I will read in the first part. So these spillover couplet words give forth new meanings constantly. So that all are harmonized through their heavenly transitions. They extend on and on without break, and thus can remain in force to the end of one's years. When nothing is said, everything is equal. But the saying and this original equality are then not equal to one another. Thus it is that I speak only non-speech. So this non-speech also is a key term in Zhuangzi. We find it in many other chapters, and many other words actually created the same way using the prefix or the word wu with other words. So non-speech is one of them. When you speak non-speech, you can talk all your life without even ever having said a word, or never utter a word without ever falling to say something. There is some place from which each saying is acceptable, and some place from which it is unacceptable. There is some place from which it is so, and some place from it is not so, and so on. It goes. I don't know how much time I have because I didn't check. But okay.
No time, you are over.
I'm over the time. Okay, sorry. Then I will close my talk. Just here for you.
1 minute.
1 minute. Yeah. Here is there are so many things to say about Zhuyan, but just one slide for you. So what concept it is connected, mostly Zheran and Hua. So the whole book of Zhuangzi is about Zheran and Hua. And also in the last 2 points, the duality or the two concepts Zhuangzi is comparing quite often is one is Zhangxin and the other is Zhengxin. So a constant heart mind is the ideal mind, like a mirror, and the fixed heart mind is more like a preconceived kind of mind. And also the very important concept in Zhuangzi is perspectives. So seeing different perspectives. As my time is over, I can't go into more details, but this picture is about perspectives. So thank you.
Thank you, Mart. And we go on. Our third presenter is Rostislav Berezkin from the Fudan University, and his topic is the story of Princess Miaoshan from the perspective of folk plots. So please change the slides. Rostislav,
yes,
microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Glad to hear all. Today I won't take much of your time talking about this story of Princess Miaoshan. Indeed, it appears to be a quite mysterious story in the history of Chinese Buddhism and history of Chinese literature. So, well, my report today is just an attempt of new interpretation, so possible looking for the possible clue to the origins of this story, because indeed they have not been defined precisely in the previous research. We just heard about the story of Sudhana or Shanzhai, right? And its transmission and transformation in China. So in case of Bodhisattva Guanyin or Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, we have even important transformation, because this has to do with the appearance of female forms. You know, in India, Avalokiteshvara is represented predominantly in the male form, and that was form transmitted to China originally. But in China, several female forms of Guanyin developed, and all of them have their own stories. The story of Princess Miaoshan is just one of them. And interestingly, it's completely Chinese subject. We cannot find it in the Buddhist scriptural literature. It presumably appeared around the end of the 11th century as a part of Buddhist proselytizing. The earliest version we have now is called The Life of the Bodhisattva of Great Compassion of Incense Mountain in Ruzhou, which was edited by the Song Dynasty official Jiang Jiqi. So according to his own version of the story, he received it from the monk at the monastery of Xiangshan, Xiangshan meaning incense mountain. Since then, this name is associated with Miaoshan and Guanyin. So this monastery exists even today. You can visit it while in China. And the story was preserved in the form of stone inscriptions. So originally it was carved on the stone in the Xiangshan monastery. And part of this survived, though it's the later copy of the original text. At the same, approximately the same period, this was transmitted to Hangzhou and was carved on the stone there. And you know that Hangzhou is another important center of Guanyin worship in China. So what's the main contents of this story? Maybe not all of you know the exact contents of this. So the powerful king of some mythical state, Miao Zhuang, who didn't believe in Buddhism, he did not have sons, but he had 3 daughters, and in order to obtain successors, he asked them to get married and give birth to grandsons. While 2 elder daughters agreed, the 3rd daughter, Miaoshan, refused on the pretext of personal religious beliefs. So she decided to follow the Buddha's path, engage in spiritual cultivation. So after many hardships and conflict with the father, Miaoshan was able to achieve her aim, so she became an enlightened person, and even more importantly, she helped her father, who was punished by the grave illness. And after the miraculous cure of the father, Miaoshan turned into compassionate Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. So, while looking at the practical use of this story in its original form, we need to note it must have been related to the cult of thousand-handed great compassionate Kuan Yin. That's the tantric image that spread in China during the Tang and Song periods, and this image was worshipped in Xiangshan Monastery. In particular, we know this from the historical records, and if you go there now, there is still this statue. But this story eventually crossed the local area, the borders of the local area. It spread in the whole China. And this is comparatively well known, as it is related to Buddhist beliefs. It is depicted in many popular images. I can't go into details here, so this is a very interesting, rare, popular print that is from the unique print in the Russian collection, showing the triumph of Мяошань. So actually this explains, gives the explanation for this thousand-handed image, because in order to heal her father, she had to sacrifice her hands and eyes, and she did so in disguise. So originally it was not recognized by her father, but then when he arrived to pay his reverence at Xiangshan, she discovered that it was indeed his daughter. So images of Miaoshan turning into Kuan Yin are well known, but there is also vernacular tradition of storytelling texts, and one of them, which is perhaps the most famous, is the precious scroll, or Baojuan. It's called Baojuan of Xiangshan, and it is still performed at the ritual assemblies. This is a picture from my own fieldwork in some areas of China. This mostly involve female believers who worship Kuan Yin, and they listen to the recitation of this text. So this is the modern situation, but in fact the text is very old, and the earliest known version that we have, it was reprinted in Hanoi in Vietnam at the end of the 18th century. And actually this text was discovered by Academician Riftin when he worked in the library of the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences. So, well, I would like to express my gratitude to Riftin, who shared this text with me and a copy, and we also wrote the research article that was published in Tongbao. Unfortunately, Riftin already passed away before its publication, but still, well, it's published. I won't go into details of this text. We just argue for its very early origin, and it's actually unique in the history of this type of literature, precious scrolls. But in connection with this research, we became very interested in the origins of this story, because we cannot find it in this similar form in any kind of Buddhist scriptures that we know. While scholars in the West and in China, they were mainly looking for the possible antecedents in the Buddhist scriptural tradition, I think we should also consider possible origins of the Мяошань story in folklore. And if we look in these indexes of folklore, we find that the story of the third daughter saving her father's life in various hard circumstances is quite widespread in the folklore of various peoples. And this is very important episode in the original story of Miaoshan. Actually, different interpretations are possible. I cannot speak about them today, but certainly this conflict between father and daughter, and then the solution of this conflict with the use of the Buddhist ideals, virtues, and also including the traditional filiality ideal. That's the core of this story. So indeed, there are such tales in India. So that was already discussed by Glenn Dadrich in his book. I won't also go into details, but Riftin suggested that we should go into the broader context. This type of tales is quite common, and there is also the similar Chinese folk tale. This is called the snake husband. So very possible the tale has the Indian origin, though very hard to prove. But actually that's also common for folklore in Eurasia, and we can also recall this famous tale. This is called Scarlet Flower in Russian. That's the Russian adaptation actually of the European tale. So the daughter agrees to sacrifice for her father. This can be compared with what we have in this final episode of the Miaoshan story. Here I also would like to note that interesting similarity with the story of the King Lear type. So this is very famous because of Shakespeare's tragedy. But here we also see this contrast between the youngest daughter and two elder sisters who didn't help their father. They stayed indifferent. This is also what we have in this King Lear's story. Well, as it's especially famous, I won't go into its details, but also would like to note the origins of this King Lear's story. So we know that he divided his kingdom between two elder daughters who flatter him, while the best of daughters, the third one, she is exiled by the father, but then when it comes that Lear is abandoned, she helps him. And the original subject goes back to the historical chronicle of Britain. This is the mythical history of Britain. It says they lived in the 8th century before Christian era, so that's completely not possible to document in other historical writings, but the source itself is of the 12th century, it's interesting that this story appears approximately at the time of this Miaoshan story in China. And the storyline of this King Lear eventually also can be traced back to folklore. So there are similar folk tales in different European countries known as Water and Soul. So this is also well documented in this folklore motifs index. Of course, there are some important differences, and this can be explained by the influence of religious ideas. Actually, another interesting aspect is the typological similarity between the story of Miaoshan, which can be said indigenous Chinese hagiography of Guanyin, and the hagiographies of female saints in Europe. Well, here is a picture of Saint Barbara, so that's also conflict between father and daughter. But well, it's any historical connections possible that waits further research. So some conclusions from my today's presentation would be that both the King Lear tale and the Miaoshan story show similarity to folk tales about a wise and kind third daughter of an ignorant and cruel king. Such connections of Chinese and European literary subjects were quite common. There were many popular stories transmitted from India to the West as well as to the East Asia. However, it's hard to find exact evidence of the common origins of the King Lear story pattern in Europe and the Miaoshan story in China. And these connections with the folklore stories also appear to be a common feature of women saints hagiographies in medieval Europe and the Miaoshan story. So this is all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Rostislav, for this very, very interesting presentation. Many thoughts arose in my mind, and this is for me also a very important and interesting topic. Now the literary and folklore spots have traveled or arisen independently in different places. But we go on now. Our next presenter is Kikee Bhutia from the Institute of Cultural Research, University of Tartu, and her topic is the moving lake of Sikkim, controversies and conversion of the sacred landscape. So Kikee, please, floor is yours. Are you ready?
Yes. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
So let me start by telling you a story. So long time ago, somewhere in the Himalaya, the place is not known, there used to be a very beautiful emerald color lake. And the lake was so pure and beautiful, and the people who were living around the lake were also becoming prosperous because of the power of the lake, because the lake was providing them with irrigation, water for domestic use. So they were much prosperous. Soon people started to utilize water also for washing clothes, for excrements, and the lake became dirty, and they started to trash the lake. They didn't care for the lake, so they started to carelessly use the lake, and then the lake became very dirty. And one day when a herdsman woke up and went to feed his cattle in the lake, there was no lake, which means the lake disappeared overnight. And one of my informant in a place called Sikkim, he mentioned to me that the lake which disappeared in that particular region, which is unknown, has appeared in a western part of Sikkim, and this is the lake that I'm going to talk about today. But before I go to a moving lake of Sikkim, or Ketchuperi Lake, I would like to give you a little bit background on where is Sikkim. So Sikkim, as you can see in the map, is sandwiched between Bhutan in the west, Nepal in the east, and a Tibetan Autonomous Region of China in the north, and Pan-Indian region in the south. Sikkim is 7,096 square kilometer in area, and demographically it is inhabited by 3 main different communities, which is also known as indigenous to the place, as well as Nepalis, some Tibetan refugees who fled after the Tibet occupation by China, as well as some Indian mainland businessman, and professional worker as a teacher or in government service who are living in Sikkim. So here in the image you can see we have 3 beautiful girls, and they represent the 3 main communities of Sikkim. To the left is a Bhutia community, in the middle is Nepali community with their traditional outfit, dress, and to the right is Lepcha community. So with that very brief introduction to Sikkim, what exactly I'm going to focus on today's presentation is to narrate or to bring out different narratives or different stories about sacredness and sacred landscape of Sikkim. And I want to present these narratives by discussing mythical history and locality, as well as the biggest controversy between Bhutia and Nepali community, and how through this history and through this controversy we can examine perception towards this sacred landscape by different communities, and how these narratives or perspectives are changing according to social and economic context. We also very briefly, because we have shortage of time, so we will very quickly, I would like to bring forth these changing indigenous spiritual values and religious belief that has been helping to focus more on sustainable or very effective management policies that helps keep the environmental conservation or the purity of the lake, for instance. So Ketchuperi Lake. This lake is in the western part of Sikkim, and it is in the elevation of 6,100 to 6,500 feet. And as you can see in the map of Sikkim, Ketchuperi Lake is in the very west part of Sikkim. So Ketchu actually means in the middle, and Palri means lotus. Thus Ketchuperi means in the middle of lotus. There are multiple different narratives or different meaning of what Ketchuperi actually mean. Some also mentioned that it means it's a place of flying yoginis or Tara. Tara is also known as female manifestation of Avalokiteshvara or the Bodhisattvas of compassion. And Palri means palace, so palace of the flying yogini or the Tara. Ketchuperi also can be meant as a pure land of Dakinis, or Dakinis are Dakinis can be understood as much more deeply. They are known as this mythical angels who are flying in the sky, just for very better understanding of us. But Dakini is much more complex than what we understand. But for our understanding today, we can just understand that Dakini is this mythical flying female figure in Buddhist understanding. And the local name of Ketchuperi is Sojotso, which means, "Oh lady, sit here." But this also comes from a story which I hope I can slowly come forth with. So there are very different myths about Ketchuperi Lake. And which are all based on belief that the lake's water contain both healing and wish-giving powers. Barren couples who cannot have children venture there to ask for fertility or progeny. Hindus and Buddhist pilgrims, come for their health and their families' health, to pray for their health. People come also to solve their marital strife. Daily people offer flowers and food to the lake Dakini. Most of the Buddhist pilgrims, especially Bhutia and Lepcha villagers, believe that the lake and its surrounding site form an anthrogeography of a Dakini. The lake is her foot, a cave is in the head, like a cave called the Judoma. Let me go through. So this is the figure of the lake from aerial view. So this figure looks like the foot of the Dakini, and in the northern part of the lake is a cave where Tara is propitiated, and a small part of jungle is her body around the lake. Dakini have multiple names, so the Dakini or the deity that live in this lake have multiple names. We call them as Gepukunga, Cholong Luchen, Nedunkar Puti. And one of the monk who told me that, who is also a part of this Kechaperi, a monastery, a small monastery who lives near the lake, told me that she also have like a different, she changes her form and appears in the lake sometime as a little girl, sometime as a monk, and she like inspect her property. So Kechaperi, the importance of Kechaperi Lake for the people in the western part of Sikkim is so vital that all the narratives, their annual rituals, their practices are surrounded around the activities of the lake. For example, within a year, the annual ritual is performed in the lake by the community, Bhutia Lepcha community specifically, to offer to the deity of the lake. And with the rise and fall of the water in the lake determines whether the western part or their village particularly will be wealthier, or their harvest will be better, or their health will be better or not. According to the change of the water level, they can predict. It's like very prophetic. So one of the myth that was related to the lake, and it was told to me by Chandra Gurung, who is a Sikkimese Buddhist but of Nepali descent, who live in the western part, who live near, actually very close to the lake. He told me that this story is about a young girl who collected Shishnu. Shishnu is this nettle plant, like the plant that stings, when a white cow appeared to her and tells her a secret. The secret was that a sacred lake was coming to that site. So it was before the story that I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, that the lake appeared all of a sudden. So this proves that there was actually a prophecy or already what do we call it? Already a sign that the lake was going to appear there. But she was not allowed to tell anyone. Frightened by the speaking cow, she immediately runs home and tells her mother and father. That night she dies. The white cow had trusted her with a secret, and she betrayed it. The impurity in her heart and action inevitably killed her. So this myth is both edifying for the future villagers as well as the explanation for the necessity for purity of heart. For example, in the any narrative related to the lake is very much to do with purity. For example, in recent years, many of the devotee who goes there is a rule. If you enter, you will see a placard saying that trashing and throwing plastic or plastic bottles, this plastic water bottles is not allowed in the vicinity, and if you throw it, then you will be fined. And so this these kind of rules were imposed also keeping in mind that we need to maintain the purity of the lake so that the lake don't move to another place again. Second local narrative, which is also similar story but narrated to me by a Bhutia community member. So what I'm trying to show here is different narratives that were shared with me by different community member who belongs to different ethnic community within the area. So the area is also inhabited by multiple community people. So Tobdin Bhutia, his name, my second local informant, he mentioned to me that he narrated that the story of a young naked woman walking from her village in search of Shishnu was to make clothes for her. So this nettle plant can be used also to make clothing, and this is one of the actually dying culture in Sikkim that in the earliest period by Lepcha community and in Bhutia community, they used to make clothes out of Shishnu. There was no water anywhere, therefore there was no Shishnu. So she sat down and prayed. Suddenly, water started appearing rapidly from the ground. Frightened, the girl ran back to her village and told her father, who went up to the lake and prayed all day long. He returned home, told his daughter not to be frightened and to also go pray by the lake. They eventually moved there and established the present village. He mentioned that one maintains a pure heart through mantra recitation, meditation, and prayer offering can only live around the vicinity. So in the northern part of the lake is this small cave where you can see the image of Green Tara and Dichendoma put in the cave, and it's people actually in the region, despite Bhutia, Lepcha or Nepali community, they go and pray in the region. So we can say that even though there are multiple communities who are living in this vicinity, they are all unified in this belief of Tara or deity or the power of the lake, and the fact that if they do not collectively maintain the lake, then the lake can move from that region to some other place. So here I'm bringing one more narrative from the field mentioned to me by two of my informants, but both of them are one is Bhutia community and another one is Nepali community. So Bhutia community said that the Bhutia community was from outside in the very right outside the lake is a small monastery, actually not so small monastery, and in the monastery is looked after by this Lama Sanji, who was the head monastery shrine caretaker of the monastery. And then in the very periphery, in the outskirts of the village is a small, like a temple, where there is a Nepali ritual specialist who usually perform. So whenever Nepali people come, when they have funerals or when they have any annual offering to be made, so they come to this small shrine, and then this ritual specialist, who was known as Ganesh Bhavan, he helped them do this puja. So my Bhutia informant told me that Dichendoma, the Tara or the deity who lives in the land, who lives in the lake, is actually a consort of Guru Rinpoche. So Guru Rinpoche is actually the pioneer of Buddhism in the Tibetan Buddhism or of the Himalaya for this context. But then whereas the Nepali ritual specialist told me on the same day that the deity who lives in the lake is actually Tara, who is also a manifestation of Parvati, who is a Hindu goddess, and Parvati is a consort or wife of Lord Shiva, who is also known as the main creator or destroyer of the earth. So to give you I feel like I'm bombarding you with a lot of information, but just so we can just understand.
Your time is nearly over.
Sorry. I'm close.
1 minute.
Yeah, I'm very close.
1 or 2.
We have Buddhist background as well as we have Hindu background. Okay, let's move on. I don't need to explain this. So, what happened in 2019 was one of the biggest controversy in the region, because until now the people were living in harmony, and they do have different belief narratives, they do have different understanding of the deities, but still they were together, they were praying together, and they were still living in harmony. But in 2018, a master called God Angel visited, who was from Nepal, and who said that the lake actually belongs to Nepali community, and he swam in the lake. And he put an Indian flag in the middle. So it has a very political and very anti-local religious action to this, and this create a lot of controversies among Bhutia and Lepcha, and as well as Nepali community who were living in the region, leading to this case being directed in High Court, and Nepal, the God Angel, being banned from India, like banned from Sikkim ever to enter. And this case in the court was helped by Sikkim Bhutia Lepcha Apex Committee, which is known as SIPLEC, which is one of the very strong Bhutia Lepcha community organization in Sikkim. To wrap up, we see that initially the different communities that were living together were constantly using the similar belief narrative to sometimes belong and sometimes to discard each other community. But this harmony between the community, even though different community, were disturbed only when there was something more stronger outside force come into the power. When the discussion of ownership and authority is discussed, given that there are multiple economic and political benefits or initiatives that can be gained from it. I think I'll just rest here. Thank you very much.